Hi, this is Roger from Kanka Labs, and in our today's part of our series about what every maker should have one are good test probe tips or grabbing test clips. And I'll show you in a second what's the reason to use at least one of these ones. First of all, the difference between the different sets is these two are only rated for 60 volts, while these one are Cat4 and Cat2, which means you can use them for up to 1000 volts. And these little grabbers here, or grabbing clips, or however they are called, they are in addition to your standard probe tips. Now, what's the reason to use these kind of test clips instead the one you get delivered with your multimeter, like these standard ones, or the cheapest ones I ever got are these one? Well, if you first of all, you already can see the low quality, but the most important reason is these are not sharp. Nice if you don't want to hurt yourself by touching them, but they are nearly totally useless when it goes to probing circuits, because you don't get through the oxide layers that you get in every kind of metal or solder junction. And even the better ones, these ones which were supplied with a more expensive multimeter, well, nice that they are rated for Cat3 and 10 amps, but they also are not sharp, and you cannot probe reliably with them, especially if you make resistance or continuity measurements. And even voltage and amps or any other measurements are not reliable if you don't have ultra sharp tips. Now let's start with the first set. This one is the one I most heavily use personally. They are quite handy. You can probe relatively delicate details. Even SMD probing is no problem. So you can even probe TSS-OP and very small form factor SMD ICs. But as I already told you, they are only rated for 60 volts. Now, I'll tell you a secret. Of course, I'm also probing there with higher voltages. At least until now, I survived it because they are really the most useful ones when it gets to getting to small ICs, or in places where these ones here, which have this protection against slipping and touching high voltage, they are simply too big for some purposes. Well, anyway, all of these ones that you see here have, of course, the 4mm standard banana plug sockets, so you can use a standard 4mm banana cable. And well, these which are for higher voltages with Cat4 and Cat2 ratings, the main difference between them is these ones here only have a very small tip outside the isolation, so the danger of accidentally shorting out any pins or any cables is reduced. And these one are quite useful because they also plug into 4mm banana sockets. So there are different usages for these two. But in these ones here with the grabber heads, They are a bit large, I admit, but well, I use them for, I don't know, 3 decades now. 3 of the sets you see are from a German quality company, Hirschmann, or Hirschmann as you might call them, Hirschmann Test and Equipment. This one is from another brand, but also high quality. And if you only can afford these, by the way, these are also the cheapest ones. If you only can afford one set, you should first of all buy this one, and in addition, perhaps the grabber test pins. And if you're really want to probe high voltages, then depending on your application, one of these sets is the right one for you. But I warn you of one thing which you perhaps can already see here. Though it is stainless steel, these ones are nickel plated, and this one is copper, what is it, copper beryllium alloy plated. You never should probe amps, so you never should make a current measurement with them, at least if you expect that when shorting out the current can become greater than a few amps, because I once accidentally probed a lead acid battery with these probes, and after 1/10 of a second they were glowing hot red from the current, because the disadvantage of these ultra sharp pins is that though you get through the oxide layers of your test article, anyway, the resistance exactly at the tip is of course relatively high, and if you if high currents are starting to flow through the tip, then you get the same effect as like contact welding. And I really welded one of these tips to the battery terminal. So be cautious when probing currents with these sharp tips. Though these are rated for 16 and let's take a look, 16 amps, and this one is even for 32 amps. You easily ruin the sharp tip when probing high currents. And the second advice, you might be able to see this, the tip is very delicate, so don't try to put high forces through it. To get through the oxide layer, it's absolutely sufficient to use relatively low forces, but don't use it as a mechanical tool for, well, I don't know, bending any wires around, because I've ruined this tip here, or nearly ruined it. It's still sharp, but you can see it has a little bend at the tip. I've ruined it by, well, misusing it, let's call it that way. So that's it for today. We have all of the 4 sets in our shop, and if you have any suggestions about what alternatives there are, or any further tips concerning concerning probe tips, then leave a comment down below or in our forum, and if you liked it, then please give it a big thumbs up, and see you next time. And now, bye from Kanka Labs, until next time.